All right, today we're diving into a hilarious story by the author Bill Bryson. It's all about a guy who is, well, a walking, talking travel disaster. For him, a simple trip is just never, ever simple. You know those days where just nothing seems to go right? Maybe you spill your coffee, you miss your bus, you walk straight into a door. We've all been there. But for the author Bill Bryson, that's not just a bad day, it's pretty much his default setting, especially when he travels.
And this is the author's own assessment of himself. It's really the key to understanding his whole worldview. He's the first to admit that simple, everyday tasks are a genuine struggle. And he's not being modest here. For him, it's just a plain fact of life.
Okay, so that brings us to our first theme, the author's just constant state of confusion. It's like he's perpetually amazed that other people can manage to get through a normal day without, getting hopelessly lost or accidentally setting something on fire.
For example, he'll go looking for the lavatory in a movie theater and somehow end up in a locked alleyway behind the building. Or think about this. He's a regular at the hotel front desk, but not because he's being friendly. It's because he can never, ever remember his own room number.
But look, these little confusions are really just the warm-up. Now we get to the main event, the great airport disaster. So the scene is Boston's Logan Airport. The whole family is checking in for a flight, and suddenly Bryson has a realization. His frequent flyer card is buried somewhere in his carry-on bag.
And it all starts with something so simple, a jammed zipper. Now most of us would probably just jiggle it a bit, right? Not Bryson. No, he applies what he calls grunts and frowns and increasing consternation, just yanking and pulling with more and more frustration.
And then it happens. With one final mighty pull, the zip gives way. It completely gives way. The side of the bag just bursts open and everything inside erupts in the most spectacular way imaginable. And we're not just talking about clothes here. It was this cascade of documents, coins literally bouncing and skittering across the floor, and, this is the important part, a huge 14-ounce tin of pipe tobacco. Yeah, this was not a small spill. We're talking about his belongings, especially that tobacco from the runaway tin, scattering across an area the size of a tennis court, right in the middle of a packed airport terminal.
His reaction is like this perfect two-act play of pure panic. First, his mind immediately jumps to how crazy expensive it's going to be to replace that tobacco in England. But that financial horror is instantly replaced by a very different kind of horror when he realizes the zipper has gashed his finger and he is now bleeding a lot. So just picture the scene for a second. There's tobacco everywhere, documents are fluttering down, he's bleeding, and in the middle of all this chaos, his wife just looks at him. And she's not angry, she's not even exasperated. She's just filled with this pure, simple wonder. And she says, "I can't believe you do this for a living." Just the perfect punchline.
Now you might be thinking, okay, that airport incident, that had to be a singular, once-in-a-lifetime disaster. Well, you would be very, very wrong. For Bryson, catastrophe isn't an exception. It's basically his travel companion.
Believe it or not, his history on the plane is even worse. He's actually been pinned helplessly by a reclining seat while trying to tie his shoelace. He drenched a fellow passenger with a soft drink, not once, but twice. And, my personal favorite, a leaky pen once turned his entire mouth, tongue, and teeth a scrub-resistant navy blue, all while he was trying to have a charming chat with the woman next to him.
Oh, and that sweet little lady he drenched with a drink twice? Yeah, she turned out to be a nun. And after that second drenching, let's just say her sweetness kind of evaporated. She let loose with an oath that, as Bryson puts it, was pretty, creative, especially coming from a nun.
But this isn't just about pure clumsiness. Underneath all the chaos, there's this deep, deep longing to, just for once, be suave, To be that smooth, graceful person that he imagines in his head. The problem is, his aspirations are constantly crashing into his reality. So, in his head, he wants to rise gracefully from a dinner table. What actually happens? Something he describes as an extremely localized seismic event. He'd love to wear a pair of light-colored pants, but he knows with absolute certainty they'll end up with gum, or ice cream, or cough syrup, or motor oil on them. As you can imagine, his family is well aware of the danger. When the flight attendants bring the food, his wife gives these hilarious, preemptive warnings to the kids like, "Take the lids off the food for Daddy," or "Put your hoods up, children, Daddy's about to cut his meat." And when he flies alone, he has his own strategy. He doesn't eat,
He doesn't drink, and sometimes he just sits very, very quietly on his hands to stop them from causing any, as he calls it, liquid mischief. Okay, so if physical grace is just totally out of the question, what about a simple administrative task, like, say, collecting frequent flyer miles? Well, this becomes his final, and maybe his most frustrating travel frontier. Okay, get this. Bryson flies 100,000 miles a year. That is enough to circle the entire globe 4 times. You would think this guy is flying to Bali first class whenever he feels like it, right?
And yet, what's his grand total of accumulated miles? 212, and that's spread across 23 different airlines. It's an almost mathematically impressive level of failure.
So how on earth does that even happen? Well, it's basically a perfect storm of his own forgetfulness and just maddening bureaucracy. Either he completely forgets to ask for the miles, or the airline somehow manages not to record them, or, and this is the most common one, the check-in clerk just informs him that he's not entitled to them for some mysterious reason.
Here's a perfect example. On a flight to Australia, he was denied his miles. Why? Because the ticket said B. Bryson, but his frequent flyer card said W. Bryson. He actually tried to explain the, quote, close and venerable relationship between Bill and William, but yeah, the clerk was not having it. So in the end, he just kind of resigns himself to the fact that, no, he will not be flying to Bali in first class anytime soon. And his final thought on the whole thing is just the perfect, self-deprecating punchline to his own frustrating story. He figures he could probably never go that long without eating anyway.
You know, Bryson's stories are so hilarious because, on some level, they're just so relatable. We've all had those moments where a simple plan just goes completely horribly wrong. So it really makes you wonder, what's your jammed zipper moment? What's that one thing that just never seems to go right for you when you travel?